Hi, Ms. Lancaster here. Just wanted to do a quick video to discuss the theories because we didn't have time in class. So culture. So looking at the culture and attempting to explain culture and its purpose, what it is, how it affects us through the three traditional sociological theories. So first off, culture is a way of life of a group of people. If we don't remember that, that's an important piece of this. So the first theory I'm going to talk about is symbolic interactionism. Okay, so symbolic interactionism, I've got kind of like the key idea up here that I think that I usually always share. It is a micro-level theory, and it really kind of talks about how we create symbols, and then give them meaning, and then use those symbols and meanings in our interactions. But the way that we learn the symbols and meanings is through interaction. So it's kind of the cyclical process. So when we really think about culture in relationship to symbolic interactionism, we really have to think about how much culture is packed full of symbols, right? When we focus on learning how we learn these symbols and how we learn meanings to these symbols, recognize that those really are the basic elements of culture. I'm like, when we actually were talking about the components of culture, there's the material tangible items of culture, but the rest are the symbolic pieces, the value, the beliefs, the norms, the language. Those are all very symbolic in nature. So when we think about culture in general, we have to recognize that symbols shape how we behave, right? They shape what we believe to be real, what we believe to be normal, what we believe to be good, bad, and right. So symbolic interactionism can really talk about how culture is our culture because we have created the meanings and the understanding of it through our interactions. Culture is something that is transmitted, as I've mentioned previously. So it is something that is learned through interactions, and it is reinforced through symbols and understanding. Okay, so that's a really important piece when we really think about symbolic interactionism. Now, the second one that I want to talk about is structural functionalism. So this one is a macro level theory, and the key idea is ultimately about how everything in society has a purpose, it has a function, and that is really to bring about stability and harmony. Our society is, all societies are composed of interdependent parts that are each fulfilling their own necessary purpose. So culture is the way of life of a group of people, right? It takes place in our social units, it takes place in our social institutions, it's reinforced and taught to us through those experiences. So when we really think about what culture is, it consists of our values, right? Which kind of tell us our key ideas, our basic understanding of what we feel is important, right? When we talk about values, those shared judgments, it includes our beliefs, what we believe to be the right way of life, our norms, right? The expected behaviors. Those norms and beliefs and values all kind of hold us together and bond us as a society, right? All societies, right? Not just ours in particular, but any society that shares culture. Culture, it plays a part in kind of holding us together, right? That's that part of that interdependent parts of a society, each fulfilling their purpose. So it's functional for everyone in society to kind of share those values and beliefs. It would be dysfunctional if everybody didn't, right? There'd be a lot more deviance when that takes place. Now, Durkheim, if you remember back from chapter 1, he used to talk about mechanical and organic solidarity. And that really kind of relates back to the type of culture that a society has. More advanced societies will be bonded differently, right? So the bonds really depend on who does what and how each person, or each group, each institution, each aspect of society works together to keep society going, okay? Now, keeping in mind, culture is beneficial for society as a whole, but that does, just because something is good for society as a whole doesn't mean that it can't be potentially problematic for individuals in society. Let's kind of consider the idea that we do have not only a dominant culture, but we have subculture and countercultures, and those would only exist if dominant culture didn't work for everyone, right? So recognizing at the big picture, the macro level, culture is functional for society because it kind of holds us together. It gives us our laws, it gives us our expectations, the kind of places us on what is expected of us to do. However, it can still be problematic for some individuals. And that brings us to our last theory, which is conflict theory. Conflict theory is a macro level theory. Its key idea or key focus is really on how inequality and conflict underlie all of our social relationships, that there is this continuous conflict amongst individuals. And when we talk about conflict from this perspective, it's not necessarily a physical conflict, but it can be just that feeling of oppression. As I mentioned when we were talking about structural functionalism, just because it's good for society doesn't mean it's good for everyone. So those individuals who may feel oppressed by certain rules, certain values, certain norms, may be in conflict with the culture that's being given to us. So society is composed of these various conflicting groups, each really kind of ultimately looking out for their own self-interest. And they all want to make their own culture dominant. So recognizing this cultural conflict that is continuously going, there is an inequality because those that have more ability and more power are more likely to be able to impose their culture on everyone else. So the dominant group may impose their cultural beliefs on everyone within society, and it's just expected to be something that they follow. And then to take it even further, when we think about what I was talking about with the functionalist perspective, the functionalist perspective really kind of talks about how everything in society plays a part in keeping society functioning. And when we think about how we learn culture through these various institutions, those institutions are kind of teaching and reinforcing what is expected of us. So from a conflict lens, we can recognize how then the dominant group, or those that are actually imposing the culture on us, may actually be in many ways manipulating individuals into following a belief system that may not necessarily be beneficial to them. Okay, so when I talk about manipulation, it really is kind of not necessarily in that negative idea, although it can be, right? It is the reality when we talk about a manipulation is like, if I were to put my hand out in front of you to shake your hand, I'm manipulating you to get you to do what I want you to do. Okay, so our institutions teach and reinforce these ideas, the cultural ideas. So from a conflict perspective, those that are in power are able to justify their power by teaching us early on that their power is supposed to be normal. Okay, so that is kind of what the conflict perspective would talk about in relationship to culture. Culture is beneficial for society from a functionalist perspective. However, from a conflict perspective, it creates struggle, it creates conflict, it creates and sustains inequality, and can be very oppressive. I hope this helps, and have a great day.